The Strait of Hormuz. Has Iran ever closed the world's most critical oil route? For over half a century, the Strait of Hormuz has served as the world's most vital energy corridor. Connecting the Persian Gulf to the Gulf of Oman and the Arabian Sea, this narrow waterway, just 21 nautical miles wide at its tightest point, is the main transit route for oil and gas exports from some of the most energy-rich nations on the planet. Saudi Arabia, Iraq, Kuwait, Iran, and the UAE all depend on it to get their crude to global markets. Also see Iran-Israel War News Day 8 live updates. According to data from the U.S. Energy Information Administration (EIA), nearly 21 million barrels of oil pass through the strait every single day, roughly a fifth of the world's daily consumption. It is also a key route for liquefied natural gas (LNG), especially from Qatar. Any disruption here doesn't just rattle West Asia, it shakes energy markets across the globe. And yet, despite decades of political brinkmanship, proxy wars, sanctions, drone attacks and naval showdowns, the Strait of Hormuz has never once been fully shut in modern history. None of the most persistent myths about West Asia's conflicts is that Iran has previously blocked the Strait of Hormuz. While it is true that Tehran has repeatedly threatened to do so, sometimes in response to sanctions, sometimes as political posturing, it has never followed through. During the Iran-Iraq War in the 1980s, both sides launched attacks on oil tankers in what became known as the Tanker War. Iran mined parts of the Gulf and used fast attack boats to target Kuwaiti and Saudi tankers. Iraq retaliated with missile strikes. The conflict led the United States to intervene, REF-lagging Kuwaiti tankers and escorting them with U.S. warships under Operation Earnest Will. Several ships were damaged, some sunk, and global oil prices spiked. But crucially, the strait remained open throughout, battered but not blocked. In 2011 and 2012, Iran once again threatened to close the strait in response to European and American sanctions targeting its oil exports and banking system. Senior Iranian officials, including then Vice President Mohammad Reza Rahimi, warned of a complete shutdown if oil sanctions were enforced. Western powers responded swiftly, dispatching naval forces to the region. The United States, the UK, and France conducted high-visibility naval exercises, making it clear that any attempt to blockade Hormuz would provoke military retaliation. Iran, ultimately, did not escalate further. More recently, in 2019, tensions soared after the US withdrew from the Iran nuclear deal and imposed maximum pressure sanctions on Tehran. Iran was blamed for attacks on tankers near the strait and was caught seizing a British-flagged oil tanker, the Stena Impero. A US surveillance drone was also shot down by Iranian forces. Once again, fears of closure gripped global markets. Yet even amid these flashpoints, the strait remained navigable. Iran's threats to block the strait have historically served as a geopolitical lever, a way to raise the stakes without firing the first shot. But a full closure has always been a risky gambit, not least because it would come at a huge cost to Iran itself. About 90% of Iran's oil exports also pass through the strait. Blocking it would strangle its own economy, already crippled by sanctions, and isolate it further. Moreover, the move would likely be interpreted as an act of war, giving the US and its allies legal and political justification for direct military intervention. With the US Navy's Fifth Fleet headquartered in Bahrain, any closure attempt would be met with overwhelming naval force. Diplomatic costs aside, Gulf countries such as the UAE and Saudi Arabia have also taken measures to reduce vulnerability by building overland pipelines that bypass Hormuz altogether. Though these pipelines don't eliminate dependence entirely, they offer partial mitigation. As a result, Iran's leadership, while often willing to provoke, threaten, or harass shipping, has historically stopped short of a full blockade. The Israel-Iran conflict in 2025 is distinct not because missiles are flying, they've flown before, but because of the scale, openness, and maritime dimension of the escalation. Three developments make this round far more volatile than previous flare-ups. Open and multi-site strikes on Iran's nuclear infrastructure. Israel has publicly acknowledged direct strikes on multiple key Iranian nuclear sites, including Natanz, Fordow, Isfahan, and Arak. These aren't isolated incidents or covert sabotage attempts. They are deliberate, declared military actions against some of the most protected and strategically vital components of Iran's nuclear program. This is a sharp departure from previous Israeli operations. In earlier years, Israel was widely believed to be behind cyber attacks like Stuxnet 2010, mysterious explosions at Natanz 2020, and the assassination of nuclear scientist Mohsen Fakhrizadeh 2020, but never formally admitted responsibility. Those were covert, plausibly deniable moves aimed at slowing Iran's nuclear progress without crossing into full-scale war. Record ballistic missile barrages deep into civilian areas. While Iran has previously launched missiles, including during escalations in 2024, this round was unprecedented in both scale and intensity. Iranian forces fired hundreds of ballistic missiles, including Sejal class and newer variants, toward Jerusalem, Tel Aviv, and Beersheba. One missile landed on the grounds of Soroka Medical Center, injuring civilians. The combination of sheer volume, trajectory over densely populated areas, and civilian casualties represents a deliberate escalation meant to pressure the Israeli public. Israel publicly declaring Khomeini a wartime target in a major rhetorical escalation, Israel has shifted from opposing Iran's nuclear ambitions to directly targeting its top leadership. On June 19, Israeli Defense Minister Israel Katz explicitly declared that Khomeini cannot continue to exist, calling him a modern Hitler and blaming him for ordering missile strikes on Israeli civilian infrastructure. Complementing Katz's statement, a Reuters report quoted Israeli officials as saying that the June airstrikes were not just about dismantling Iran's nuclear and missile capabilities, but were also aimed at breaking the foundations of Khomeini's rule and weakening the regime's internal grip on power. This is the first time Israel has publicly identified Ayatollah Khomeini himself as part of its war objectives. Previous conflicts, even at their peak, focused on Iran's weapons programs or proxy forces. And even a temporary disruption to the flow of oil through Hormuz would have serious global repercussions. Energy markets are already jittery. A full blockade could send oil prices soaring past $120,130 per barrel within days. Shipping insurance premiums would spike. LNG supply chains, particularly to Asia, would be severely impacted. Major energy importers like China, Japan, South Korea, and India would feel the heat almost immediately. Naval deployments would increase across the board, and the chances of accidental escalation between rival warships or submarines would rise sharply. The US has already repositioned key naval assets in the Gulf, including aircraft carriers and guided missile destroyers. Freight delays, insurance repricing, and investor anxiety could together inflict real damage on the global economy. India imports more than 60% of its crude oil through the Strait of Hormuz, sourcing supplies from key partners such as Iraq, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, and the UAE. Given this dependency, any prolonged disruption in the strait could affect energy flows and pricing, but Indian officials have sought to project calm amid rising tensions. Speaking to News 18, Union Minister for Petroleum and Natural Gas Hardeep Singh Puri offered reassurance, stating even if everything goes wrong, we have enough oil. He explained that out of the 5.5 million barrels of crude oil India imports daily, around 1.5 million barrels come via the Hormuz route. The worry will be if the strait is closed or choked, he noted, adding that there are many countries that would not want it to be shut. Puri emphasized that while India is monitoring the situation closely, the Strait of Hormuz has not been closed in the last 50 years, even during high-tension phases. I would use the word anxiety, not worry, he said. There have been many phases of heightened tensions in the region, but energy does not stop flowing. India's strategic petroleum reserves SPR provide an additional cushion, covering approximately 910 days of national demand. Nanan swipe left for next video. The Strait of Hormuz is more than just a strategic waterway, it is a geopolitical barometer. Its status reflects the tensions in West Asia, and the current indicators are flashing red. While history shows that Iran has never actually closed the strait, the dynamics in 2025 are markedly different. Open hostilities, regional spillover, and the growing likelihood of U.S. intervention. Whether Iran crosses that final line, and whether the world can afford the consequences, remains to be seen. Latest blogs.